When I crossed the 100-hour mark in Elden Ring, so far from where I started, and yet nowhere near finished, one thought eked its way into my stunned brain. This is one of the best games of all time. Elden Ring isn't just a game, it's a journey, one that was beyond the scope of my comprehension on several accounts, but also just an amazingly fun experience when you boil it down. When I rode into Learning of the Lakes for the first time, I was just baffled that it could be as big, beautiful, and immersive as Limgrave, which had just taken me almost 20 hours to pick clean like a vulture. Little did I know, I had barely scratched the surface of this enormous beast of a game. Elden Ring does something truly different, presenting both unthinkable layered level design and dumbfoundingly open endless freedom. I was worried that the open world would mean a drop in overall quality in the name of quantity. As From Software's first entry into the open world foray proper, it's truly a masterpiece that probably should have failed, fusing together the traits of prior games into a gargantuan open world, yet nothing suffered in translation. In fact, for my tastes, most of it got better. The total experience, the adventure, with far more ways to play, all the hassles and convolution of prior titles is just gone, unhinging the systems that often made it more of a hassle than it should be, like providing endless stamina out of combat, a smart HUD that vanishes when it's not needed, and a lot more. The joy of exploration is unmatched, giving an absurd amount of things to stumble on a world so massive and beautiful that it's almost intimidating, yet oddly still effortless to battle through because it was so well designed. This is a very weird and delightful combination. Though honestly, it felt very daunting to trek through a game so hard, so enormous, so unbelievably never-ending almost. I recall vividly the feeling of awe, thinking there was no way the game could keep getting bigger. Truthfully, I thought the game was going to end every time I finished a new area. Limgrave, Lernia, okay, this was 35 hours. I can beat Dark Souls 3 in 35 hours, so we must be getting to the end. But wait, onto the Atlas Plateau, Volcano Manor, Mount Gilmore, surely this must be over soon, 45 hours and counting. But then I stumbled on Caelid, a sea of red skies and music mimicking an infested, buzzing beehive. Truly, this is one of the best examples of when game audio sounds like what the level actually looks like. No small feat, you can bet your bottom dollar. Yet onwards I pressed, even further to Lindell. This is where I thought the game was really going to end. The clock struck 60 hours, yet ever more awaited to the east, in fact dozens more hours, and then I stumbled on Sophia River. When I came here, flipped open the map and realized there was an entire secret underground area which opened up to no less than 4 or 5 gigantic areas itself, I found myself gasping for breath at how much content there was in this game. Just wow. I sat there in a moment of pure deja vu, reminded of the moment Zelda 3 dropped its Dark World on me. Areas? No, these aren't areas as we've come to expect from other open worlds plopped down on us in recent years. Lumping these places in with other AAA open world areas is an insult. Limgrave and the like are areas deserving of a masterpiece. They don't just look and sound incredible, they're piñatas, exploding with so much content per square foot that it truly baffles the mind. This one game, for the price of so much else on the market, offers an endless sea of discovery and a cosmic-sized map that most importantly and unironically never ever overstays its welcome. At no point did I ever want anything less than I received, and that is a nearly impossible feeling for me to possess with a game that can take over 120 hours to beat for an average, semi-complete playthrough. Vastness hardly describes the lands between. They are as dense as they are vast, yet somehow, someway staying exciting to the end, because the minutia of the game is not ignored at the expense of the scale. I would tell myself, there's no way that if I run to the furthest corner of the map, behind some tiny rock, I would find something. Yet there it is, the entrance to another secret. Forget about required content, that is almost another game entirely. Elden Ring's world is a second game, so seamlessly hiding treasures and secrets, characters scattered everywhere, inside small bushes even, completely out of sight, little stories to find, items with inscriptions to decode the mysteries of the world, yet just barely, to leave you never truly sure 100%. Dungeons, caves, tunnels, shortcuts everywhere, so esoteric and concealed that you could never uncover them all for yourself without but months of time. I became obsessive over this game like a puppy with his new squeaky toy, spending far too much time looking over the edges of wayward cliffs, trying to find the most insidiously hidden path, rock, shelf, anything I could fall down onto, leading to, who knows. I just had to find everything. Is there anyone else watching this video who has looked over far too many cliffs in this game? Of course no game could hold on to that childlike sense of discovery for its entire course. Elden Ring's mini dungeons can get repetitive, and they don't hold a candle to its legacy dungeons, as they are often much smaller and less detailed, but that's only because they exist in a game that otherwise has the best level design of all time. When you're comparing something to Stormville Castle, a simple cave that would have otherwise been very good in another game is always going to be not as good in this one. From does need to work on their underground assets though. The caves don't pop the way the rest of the game does. They can feel quite flat lined up to the extravagant vistas, sharp lighting and wisping particle effects when you're riding on the surface. But as a subsidiary portion of the game that is not required, I think they're mostly very fun, all things considered, for the exception of the chariot sections, which I can only describe playing through as literal hell. Regardless, Ring capitalizes on the notion that its world activities must offer payback. Nothing is worse than feeling like a game is wasting your time for little reason, and this game showers you with stuff. Purple shiny items, treasure boxes with rare items, you'll find them everywhere, tucked behind terrain, on the top of buildings, after fights or difficult encounters off the beaten path, rewarding your inquisitiveness as a tarnished. Many dungeons shower the player not with resources or hearts, but with things that have a direct and immediate impact on the game. Weapons, armors, spells, talismans, and weapon arts. And souls, even more valuable, upgrade materials and bell bearings that will help you in future boss battles and areas. This isn't the achievements, collectible junk, or trite grindy rewards you see in other lesser games. At best, you'll get something awesome that fundamentally changes the way you play the game, and at worst, you'll find an item that you don't need right now but could be interesting when I respec. That's a pretty good trade-off. All squished on top of a game that is truly fun to play with advanced gameplay mechanics, beautiful diverse scenery and music, compelling gameplay scenarios and bosses, escalating side stories, and multiple endings. It's all there. Best of all, no content is locked off. I mean, how many times has the invisible wall or skull icon enemy prevented you from exploring the area that you truly wanted to? I mean, just think about how baffling this all is. I, at this point, had around 20 hours tallied. On all accounts, I should have been somewhere in Stormville Castle, yet here I am, a random zigzag of paths I followed, underneath the very castle I was supposed to breach, northwards, past a great foggy lake, north even more, past ruins, mages, giant lobsters, enormous turtle mausoleums, places that looked long lost to past, beyond any borders, fighting giant, undead, creepy spider hands for absolutely no reason. They could have made these hands spiders like every other game ever made. The reason I had come here was not even a reason at all. I was on no quest, I had no objective. I wasn't supposed to be here by any means, and I didn't know where I was. I just happened to stumble here because I was having fun, and I couldn't be bothered to stop. But maybe I was supposed to be there. Maybe that's the point of a giant free world, to encourage completely organic play. Wait. Not encourage it, of course not. Dictating direction with an invisible hand can be artificial and phony, but to actually build something tangible that can allow me to do that for myself, without feeling obligated, bored, fatigued, or tired. Better yet, without feeling pressured to do anything in that world that would discourage me so, including all the predetermined elements that we naturally snap to in standardized open worlds, like quest trails, boundless tiny icons on a map, endless pointless collecting, limitless glibness, ironically including the story, that by all accounts be gravely impacted by this incalculable way of play. A game doesn't have to conform to what preceded it, nor carry its failings or stumblings, and Elden Ring is the example of how to structure open world game freedom. Not the only way to do it, but a very, very good way. Stormville Castle may be where 95% of players go for their first great rune. However, it is completely, utterly optional. I simply arrived at the hidden path, intentionally put here to spark my nosiness, and I looked down and thought to myself, well hey, there's probably something down there. And down I went. Only halfway down did I say, well shit, this is taking me to a brand new area, isn't it? This is why I appreciate the map and the marking system. You can lay out all the points you couldn't go to or just didn't at the time, all the forks in the road, and come back without needing to make any mental notes. Exploring a game is always more enjoyable when you're not burdened by this process. This is why you can feel almost careless when playing Elden Ring, almost free to set it and forget it in a sense. And check out what's down there. I mean, why not? Why not? What a simple and enormously difficult state of mind to facilitate. All of the quality of life features make it very convenient to enter this wandering without purpose playstate, yet ironically they never ruin the challenge of the game. This is such a perilous wire to walk. Elden Ring is a game where the moment-to-moment difficulty remains, but with exploration that is far less grating, due to features including but not limited to plenty of sites of grace, unlimited storage space, the option to pick up regions without stopping, crafting on the go, the easy takeoff animation with the horse, jumping on the horse, the ability to attack, use spells, consumables, and flasks while on the horseback and in motion, no weapon repair systems, potion refills when you finish a group of enemies, no durability, and the vanishing HUD, which also smartly acts as a silent indicator if you're in combat or not. And then of course the two biggest improvements, unlimited out-of-combat stamina, which is massive, and the pouch system, which frees you from cycling the direction pad to find the item you want, which has always been very annoying in previous titles. Combined, these somewhat subtle features make general exploration and combat painless, reinforcing the idea that there is no correct way to play or place to go. The point I'm trying to make is that From went from having some of the most intentionally obfuscated and unfriendly mechanics, world tendency, massive boss runbacks, cryptic NPC story threads and requirements, and more, to making it frictionless and user-friendly. Maybe not accessible, Elden Ring is tremendously hard, but at least approachable, which is ultimately a great thing if the mystery of it all is maintained, and more critically still, the difficulty. It's left intact despite these implementations, as bosses and enemies required for progress are not any less difficult than previous games. You simply get to explore the game on your own terms, how you want to, at what pace, within a system that is far more fluid and fun to be in. We've got a lot more Elden Ring to cover, but first, let me thank the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. Now, a lot of you know I like to cook, but the truth is, going to the grocery store or sitting in traffic trying to get takeout food is something I often don't have the patience for. So I tried HelloFresh, selected some vegetarian dishes, and the ingredients and recipes shortly arrived at my doorstep. What's cool about HelloFresh was that all the ingredients came in little individual packages, which means not only was there less food prep for me, but also ensured that I had zero food waste. It also means I was able to make two versions of this chickpea tabbouleh bowl, one vegan for myself as I no longer eat meat or dairy. The recipe was really clear, and after about 20 minutes we had a nice tasting dish. And it saved me so much time this week that I was able to get a lot more stuff done, like gaming and making this video for you guys. So yeah, HelloFresh is actually something I can recommend. If interested, use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use the code POGDownward16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts across 6 HelloFresh boxes plus free shipping. And without further ado, back to the show. The amount of variety is what truly staggers me. A lot of games have a central theme, building a cohesive world to match it, which makes for a very grounded experience because it's very consistent. It also makes the game less expensive to produce, as assets can be reused and recycled more often. Consistently gothic, consistently alien, consistently dark, consistently apocalyptic. Elden Ring never tries to be homogeneous, it's more about grand scale and grand variety here. Again, making you feel like you're on a never-ending adventure. You give up congruity for the sake of diversity, that's for sure, one subjective pro or con depending on your preference. They've gone with a high fantasy approach, and the environments are so unbelievably different. Limgrave, the classic green rolling hills. Lernia is the blue lake level, wonderfully eerie and lonely. The gentle, sweeping music, lovely colors, foggy at times, glimmering at others. The composition is very ephemeral, almost feminine. It is beauty without words. A place you can truly get lost in on the basis of its embellishments alone. The Atlas Plateau is the autumn forest equivalent, golden and vibrant and beautiful, Eastern inspired almost, with oriental music vibes and falling leaves. A nod to the Cherry Blossom Festival in Japan, I think anyway. Then you've got Caelid, rotting redlands of diseases and dragons feeling like nothing else in the game. Then there's the snow areas, high risen with steep mountainsides, giants and a looming end drawing near. You're almost at the edge of the world. The game has a very upward sense of momentum at this point, like you're climbing, metaphorically speaking, to the heavens almost. But then you have all of these other areas, most completely optional, which says a whole hell of a lot about the current state of gaming, where games are trying to skate by delivering the bare minimum, and hoping no one says anything. My favorites are the Halig Tree and Volcano Manor, nestled on the far side of Mount Gilmore. Bubbling, sunburst lava, embers and ash falling from the sky, deep, haunting, organ-like cello music. The flickering of candles lights up the darkness in a bloody red atmosphere. This lava looks incredible. From Software has come a long way with their environmental assets and the use of particle effects. The graphics overall might not be best in class, but the aesthetics and music are absolutely wonderful. The entire area enveloped me. I was so captivated and motivated to understand why this place was the way it was. Who were these people and why did they want to confront their lord? The matriarch Tanith. It seemed like I was destined to be here and meet her. We receive a comforting welcome after all. Praetor Rykard. What an absolute godlike name for a boss. The atmosphere evokes a haunted house, very mysterious. Something is awry, something is very wrong here. I loved the atmosphere and I felt compelled to look into this place extensively. Truth be told, I combed the game like an insane man. Endless was I raking myself back and forth over the map, scouring everything the Lands Between had to offer, cracking every quest I could find. I found many, yet I missed many too, I'm sure. I didn't finish the quest until 120 hours had gone by. I just wanted to leave nothing on the table, and more than anything, I wanted to discover why this strange group of people, dubbed the Bloody Fingers, were hunting down the Tarnished. Why did they feel like the Two Fingers betrayed the world? So I trekked on, through the dungeon crawl, beyond Tanith's orders and quests, ultimately getting face to face with Rykard, hoping to find some answers from the Mammoth Serpent. Unfortunately, it's a gimmick fight. However, the boss arena is so impressive, and the lighting and color choices are gorgeous. The battle culminates in one of the most freaky, fucked up moments in Soul's history with Rykard's face reveal. The presentation is surreal, he's horrifying, and when he pulls out the blasphemous blade, laden with all the bloody hands of all the tarnish he has eaten, it dawns on you that you were, all this time, destined to be his next meal.
Join myself and King as family. Together we will devour the very god.
His voice work impeccably perverted and warped, adding another layer to this very sinister twist. Throughout the entire game, From Software continues to impress with their boss introductions and story arcs, and this one for me was the best. It's a shame the game reuses so many boss designs, but the demigods themselves are always amazing. And with Rykard, it never just ends there. Elden Ring always has more to discover, as you can, if you wish, come back to his corpse to find Tanith, feasting on his brain like a zombie, swimming in the ruby red river of his blood herself. It is an amazing presentation, and I was just blown away with the metamorphosis of this weird and frankly awesome side story. To think all of this effort went into a 100% optional area. Make no mistake, many who finish the journey will never see this. And this is content that likely took a huge amount of time, money, and manpower to implement. That is dedication few games provide, as one of the goals of most consumer products is to utilize labor efficiently, and nothing is less efficient than developing content that the masses likely won't engage with. My only qualm is that there was so much more that could have been done with Tanith and Rykard. When Tanith offered me into her service, I thought this was going to be a major choice in the game, that I, this fell tarnished, would now be banished from the will of the Fingers, exiled from their graces. That if I went back to the Round Table, I'd be attacked on sight for joining the Bloody Crusade. After all, I killed 3 Tarnished in my short crusade with Tanith. But nothing came to be, and that does fill me with sadness. Still, it's a wonderful side story that I continue to think about throughout writing this video. Either way, what's nice is that, no matter what quest you pursue, it's much easier to gain information about them and track down who you need to talk to. Elden Ring has amazing companion stories and side quests to find. They're very gripping due to some great voice acting and writing. At times, creepy, somber, sweet, melancholy, despair, often a combination of various emotions. Skipping the dialogue in this game is a disservice to yourself. Within these conversations and the information you're presented, much of the fog, though, has been lifted from prior games. Not all of it, it's still easy to miss much, but the majority is much more clearly presented. Conversations are less vague, though somehow still obscure, a combination that From has struggled with over the years. And I really like the new feature that certain NPCs have of offering dialogue selections that recount where you need to go, who to kill, and what the context is. This helps because, frankly, Elden Ring requires so very little of you to reach its end. There's only a few mandatory things you actually have to do. So much can be and will be skipped. The ultimate beauty is the freedom that you can come back to the stuff at any time if you miss it, or perhaps hit a roadblock and can't seem to get past it. Perhaps not all the story threads, but everything else. You can do 50 other things going 50 other directions, stumbling into new areas, some of which are a lot easier, giving you the tools, the souls, and the confidence to come back and conquer those areas. And goddamn, some of these areas are hellaciously hard. One of the issues associated with any open world game is balance. How do you balance a game when players can do anything they want and finish the game in a variety of ways? The amount of variables that cannot be controlled in this game is tremendous. Before you arrive at a boss, the game doesn't know what level you were going to be, if you farmed 1,000,000 souls, what weapons you were going to have, or your upgrades or your skills. It also can't account for people looking up guides, rushing to overpowered weapons, or duping items, all things that will bring up the overall skill level and power level for at least a section of the player base. Nor does it know in what order you tackle the content, so escalating the difficulty of certain mechanics from prior areas or bosses becomes blurred and contorted. And the same issue occurs for developing overall difficulty ramping on the total game scale. With 1,000,000 ways to play, Elden Ring is simply unable to determine how hard the game should be at any moment. And the end result, not surprisingly, is a lot of balance issues, which turns out to be Elden Ring's only major, albeit entirely subjective, flaw. Elden Ring is a very weirdly balanced game, with abrupt, violent spikes in difficulty at seemingly random places in both areas of required and optional content. To be clear, this isn't a condemnation of the game, this is only my experience, as with all things in this video, so please keep that in mind. The game seems to be split into phases, it's almost like 3 or 4 different games rolled into one. The first game is Limgrave and Lernia, which I would lump into the bucket of moderate challenge. These two sections at first, they do seem hard, but once you get to Lindell, you realize they weren't that bad, you just had to get used to the game, the controls, and what was expected of you. Outside the mages in the Rhea Academy, there's not many sharp or annoying spikes in challenge. Hell, even the grafted Scion was removed from Stormville Castle in the beta to make the game a little bit easier. Then you have the second game, which are the kind of hard areas like the Atlas Plateau, Sophia River, and Mount Gilmore. However, then you have Lindell, which is game number 3. This is where Elden Ring officially starts. Lindell is gorgeous and I absolutely love this place, but damn is it pretty freaking hard. To the game's credit though, at least they attempt to warn you of this impending onslaught with the incredibly hard Tree Sentinel boss outside the gates. Still, the difficulty spike was a big shocker for me, and here on out, the game never let up on the gas. The final game is, well, everything past this point. Crumbling Fair Missoula, Mog, the Fire Giant, Haligtree, and the Elden Beast, which for my money is far and away the hardest portion of Elden Ring. Obviously, some of these are optional bosses and or areas, and you have to admit that optional content in video games should always be harder than what's required. This goes back to the days of Nintendo 64 when hub world style games became very popular. Simply look at Mario 64. You had your painting levels for star progression, and then you had your Bowser stages, which also gave you stars, but they were optional since you only needed 70 of the 120 total star count to beat the game, which allowed the devs to make them harder because they weren't mandatory. If these stages were mandatory, you'd have to make them easier so less skilled players would actually be able to progress forward. So as long as the target audience we're aiming for can actually beat the game with a degree of effort we deem appropriate, we can dump harder stuff on the side for completionists. If there's any silver lining, most of Elden Ring's challenge does lie within the realms of this optional content. Melania, Radon, this Dragon Lord, the Valiant Gargoyles, which... you, Mog, the Crucible Knight duo, and the Falling Star Beast are, in my opinion, some of the hardest bosses in the game, obviously relative to where I was power-wise when I arrived at each encounter. Although, I can't lie, some of the mandatory content is just as hard, such as the Fire Giant, Malekith, the Elden Beast, and honestly a lot of the standard non-boss late-game enemies like the Azula Beastmen, and it all boils down to how Elden Ring was designed as an open-world game. Elden Ring has to account for the fact that players may have explored the entire game world leading up to the point at which they face a boss, farmed millions of runes, picked up all of the powerful and gimmick weapons, upgraded all of their weapons to max, and leveled up as much as possible. When you have a game that has so many easy, exploitable rune farms, people can and will farm. So you have to set the balance bar extremely high, almost overtune it. This is the only way to ensure that these top-end power players are still challenged. Bosses by themselves can't even be balanced with the introduction of the new Spirit Summon mechanic. Balancing bosses wasn't at any point easy for Souls, I'm sure, but it had to be more doable since co-op summons would increase the HP of the boss. This helped normalize the difficulty, with the goal being to make the boss as difficult solo as it was when a buddy was helping you out. However, this is all flipped with spirit summons because they don't impact boss health. They simply make it easier, especially on multi-enemy bosses where they can aggro one of the enemies while you wail on the other. So obviously we have a problem here. If you put summons into the game, you have to assume most players will use them, but if you balance the game around the spirits, you then make it unbalanced for players who don't. This gets even more blurry when you tie upgrades to spirits, creating even more guesswork as to how strong their summons will be at any point. I mean, just think about it. Elden Ring is an open world game where you have an entirely free world to farm, with players who can arrive at bosses, dungeons, and enemies in thousands of different states of power and orders, with players of all skill levels and the ability to summon help in 10 different states of power in a game that has completely busted builds and special weapons like Azure Comet, Sword of Night and Flame, Moonveil, Rivers of Blood, and more. Where do we even begin? This is one of the major downsides of open world games and where linear titles tend to shine, because it is so much more difficult to figure out. So the only sensible thing to do is balance the hardest mandatory bosses around an extremely high level character who has a fully upgraded weapon with all of the spells available to him, and hope bosses aren't too easy, so that other players of lower skill and power can use the spirit summon mechanic to make it possible for them to win too. With the most significant side effect being that high level characters who also use summons simply have their challenge trivialized. Either way, something isn't going to work. This is why balancing overall seems chaotic, random, overtuned for some, undertuned for the rest. If you really think about it, a great boss fight requires so many boxes to be checked. Unique boss mechanics, animations, attacks, and weapon combos, boss mechanics that don't invalidate a playstyle, including magic, strength, daggers, etc., and ones that provide windows for attacking for all weapon and cast speeds. The player should also be able to beat bosses without getting hit, meaning there shouldn't be a prevalence of trading blows or taking unavoidable damage. And you also need to make sure every single attack is appropriately telegraphed, and of course design presentations and boss arenas that are unique. This is a daunting challenge, to say the least. Like all games in the Souls lineup, the usual suspects are still present, however. One-shots, camera issues, creeping massive spell effects that crumple your frame rate, ludicrous health pulls, delay attacks, instant proccing AoE explosions when you get too close, teleports, extreme amounts of range, status effect buildups, or having unrealistic amounts of stamina to the point where it looks like they never ever stop attacking. This isn't anything new to the franchise. Of course, I'd like to see less of these things in the DLC, but overall the gameplay is exquisite despite it. It's a proper evolution from Dark Souls 3. Yes, the bosses can be frustrating at times, but considering the absurd number of the bosses and the requirements I just went over to make them actually good, they did a fantastic job overall, even if the balance isn't quite there yet. I personally question the balance of the Halig tree the most. It's a very compelling, serene, beautiful, and truly original area. From Software just loves to play on verticality, don't they? And with Elden Ring's new horse and jump mechanic, they push the limits multiple times of how it expects you to fight and hunt for items, playing on the notion of vertigo and risk versus reward pretty well. It also carries a thematic element to it, the feeling that you're ascending to become Elden Lord with this upward trajectory, versus descending, which was prevailing in Dark Souls 1. However, with enemies spraying bubbles from miles away that lock onto you like missiles from a fighter jet, and throngs of thrashing bug giants roaming on lower branches ready to eat you alive if you drop down, the first part of the level is actually literal torture gameplay-wise. It is such a weird symbiosis, as the environment is otherwise very soothing and warm with bright colors and just beautiful music in the canopy. Honestly, I could stop here and admire this vista forever. But I mean, did we really need this combination of enemies when space is so limited? Thankfully, once the town square has been reached, the legacy dungeon proper is very good with tons of trick shortcuts and exquisite detail, though again, with extraordinarily consistent challenge, to the point where dying for me became more of a routine than perhaps it should have been. And with Malenia being the hardest boss in the game by far, the climax of Halig Tree once again jacks up the toughness by an X factor. The fact that she can be staggered is interesting, and this lets you create your own openings, which is rare for this game. However, there's no denying she is overtuned, leading people to cheese, use one-shot magic builds, Moonveils, Bloody Slash, Rivers of Blood, and any manner of otherwise overpowered combinations to simply get out alive. Though, truth be told, I can't really complain too much about the hardness factor in this game when the game gives you so many tools to actually overcome its challenges. Malenia herself has plenty of weaknesses. She can be staggered by various weapons, skills, and spells. Radon is incredibly weak to Scarlet Rot. Godric is weak to fire and holy. The fire giant is susceptible to bleed. There's all sorts of consumables, buffs, overpowered weapons, and spells to give you the edge. Guard counters and jump attacks with strength builds are also completely busted. You can use Bloodhound Step for fast fights, you can use Sleep Pots for gank style fights like the Godskin duo, and more. And honestly, the balance issues of bosses can be influenced by the player anyway. If you think it's too easy, don't use the spirits. If you think it's too hard, use the spirits. Level up, get a better weapon, you get the picture. Balance, though, is something that can be fixed by one guy eating Cheetos at his desk at From Software, so ultimately it's not a permanent issue, especially considering From has been quite active since release with patches. I believe Elden Ring to be the best 100 hours you can possibly spend playing a video game. It is a masterpiece. It's addictive, fun, hard as hell. The game world is so original looking, and it sounds incredible. The look of the world is something you see in a dream, the places of fantasy and weirdness and make-believe that you woke up too soon from, closing your eyes hoping you could re-enter that dream but you know you can't. Those special places were brought to life. Perhaps a few of them are a little bit more aggravating than they need to be, but they are majestic nonetheless. The new gameplay options, refined combats with new jumping and stealth mechanics, guard counters, and more. The sheer wealth of special attacks, ashes of war, magic, and spells. They provide so much variety to builds and general gameplay. The options are truly incredible. Most importantly though, it leaves you feeling absurdly accomplished like few games can despite its draining length. This truly is the culmination of From Software, perhaps their magnum opus, and a game that I personally will never forget. But oddly enough, I don't feel compelled to play the game anymore. I was so hyped for New Game Plus after finishing it, I was on this high. But this weird feeling of doneness struck me like lightning as I was strolling through Limgrave yet again shortly after starting New Game Plus. It wasn't that I was bored of it, I just felt that I didn't need to replay it, that I had seen what I needed to see, and that feeling made me feel sort of weirdly unmotivated to keep going. I blazed through Stormvale, killed Godric, grabbed the key to the Academy gates, did some low-level invasions, and then I quit. I'm being entirely genuine when I say Elden Ring is perhaps my fourth favorite game of all time, just barely below Bloodborne. The truth is, I received my review copy of it alongside everyone else, but I didn't want to rush through the game and barf out a review for money on day one, so I decided to spend my time with it, and I'm very glad that I did because it really is that incredible. But I don't know why I haven't immediately replayed it. I mean, I've put close to 1,000 hours with the Dark Souls trilogy. I think I can attribute that feeling though to how I played it. I mean, I snuffed out everything on my first playthrough. I literally ran up to every nook and cranny. Like a madman, I explored everything. I turned away from no challenge as well. I used all my larval tiers. I had an arcane build, a Sith Lord setup with Vike's Dragon Breath. I killed my foes with a flaming dual-wield strength build. I used the Darkmoon Greatsword, intelligence, faith spells. I was a paladin, and then a ninja with dual-wield katanas, madness with Vike's Spear. I mean, I tried everything. The game gives you so many opportunities to experiment, which ultimately was why I guess I played Dark Souls 4 times in a row. I had no prior knowledge, no skills, no nothing. I played one way because I didn't know there was anything else. But here, that wasn't the case. And I love that the game allows this to happen. It truly is one of the most generous games ever. It leaves nothing on the table, only what you missed. Perhaps though, that is the very reason why I'm closing the Elden Ring book for now. Maybe it's so big that it fills me with a dauntingness. Thinking about retracing my steps through this massive adventure once again isn't something that I'm perhaps ready for right now. But I know deep down, this isn't the last time I'll play Elden Ring. Of course, I'll gladly play the DLC, but further down the road, I know in my heart I'll play the game from scratch once again, just to see how it holds up when all the bravado and hype have disappeared. I wanted to make sure to get this point across, ultimately, because it sets up context to my feelings. You see, we often look at games as a number. How many hours do we get out of this game? How far will it hold my attention until the next game comes around? So many of us play with this mentality. It's not the mindset of being a completionist. It's about playing a game literally until you're sick of it. We can treat games like the commodities they are and run them dry, but that's not what I want to do for a game when I want to write about it. The purpose of this video is to present how I felt about Elden Ring the moment the credits rolled down. This is why this video is written very romantically, I guess. I'll be honest, it's probably more of a gushing than it should be. The first half of the video was framed in an almost childlike sense of glee, but I guess there was a reason for it. I guess it's written this way because precisely this is how I felt when I was playing the game, and honestly, when I first beat it. I see a first playthrough as a very special thing. Even if a game is meant to be replayed, you can't hold on to that special feeling. At some point you will do more harm than good to your memory of it. You might get your money's worth, but consider at what cost. And I wanted to be sure that what I wrote accurately reflected my state of mind when I was in that moment, not after I spoiled it by running the game into the ground. Because I could have harped on a lot of the small grievances I had with the game with a critical hat, and made damn sure you knew what bothered me in microscopic detail, even if it was for a blip in time. Like, are mini-bosses and enemies reused too much? Do bosses go airborne for too long and limit your attack opportunities? Do they use too many sound assets from prior games? Are there some annoying enemies? Are there some annoying bosses? Did I get frustrated from time to time, on this fight, on that fight? Sure, but the truth is, these feelings didn't bother me but for more than a split second. At the end of the road, the game is otherwise so pristinely polished, fun, and exquisite, and that kind of experience quickly wipes away any mild nuisance. Frankly, Elden Ring is an all-time great game, where its few flaws are almost meaningless. There's so many moments I'll never forget about this game, and I want to share those with you before I end speaking. Maybe some of you feel the same way I do. I truly adore Millicent's questline. I despair of the finality of it. I wanted to save her. Her last words are a tragedy. She's one of my favorite NPCs. Ronnie's multi-hour adventure, I mean, what can you say about it? It's so deep and complicated. It's so sad too. You learn so much about the lore behind Elden Ring. It makes you appreciate the finer details of the story. She's also irresistibly cute. That moment, Godric tears off the dragon head. Rykard with the blasphemous blade, oh, it is truly spine-twisting some of the moments in this game. Terrific bosses like Godfrey, Mog, and Renala. I just love the sound when her egg shatters to pieces. This has to be one of the most pleasing boss arenas From has ever made. Its simplicity and elegance is so attractive. Exploring the capital, discovering a dragon hovering above the ground wound up in a tiny little ball. The fight is also extremely impressive. Plummeting down the elevator in Mistwood and seeing the false stars of the Sophia River. Was it not so unexpected and gorgeous to you too? And fighting Radagon as the title music thunders across the arena. Elden Ring is a masterpiece, tarnished only on the tiniest level, and I'm very excited to see what From Software comes up with next. It's going to have some very large shoes to fill.